this is where we can focus on other areas of intel within the leaked documents that involve so-called allied nations, which are bonkers in their intelligence assessments, but have also been reported by the mainstream media. So let's go ahead and put the first one up there on the screen. This has probably got to be one of the most insane parts of it, is that the documents show a huge schism between the U.S. and South Korea in terms of supplying lethal aid to Ukraine. Now, the schism matters for a couple of reasons. Number one, it shows us that the U.S. is asking South Korea for arms, and the South Koreans, in their internal negotiations with the National Security Council, discussions with the president, are saying, we don't want to give these to Washington because we don't think that Washington is going to be the end user. We think that they're buying them on Ukraine's behalf, and then they're just going to give them to Ukraine, and that violates our internal policy. But second, it shows us that we basically have the phone tapped of the National Security Advisor to South Korea. There are direct quotes, people, of his exact lines and inquiries inside internal deliberations, and also the internal thinking of the South Korean president, who's trying to avoid phone calls with President Biden and with senior U.S. officials because he doesn't want to be confronted over why his government doesn't want to sell Washington the weapons. So, of course, South Korea is a very close ally of ours, but I thought it was important for us to pull this out, Krystal, because what does this show? Not all, even our close allies are not all with us on this Ukraine thing. That actually shows you a very clear example of, they're like, hey, we don't want problems with Russia. We have our own policy. And DC is trying to force us into this conflict, even though we don't really want to be in here. It's really interesting.
And they were trying to actively avoid phone calls with Biden because they were uncomfortable about, like, they're like, I don't know what we're going to say or do here, because we don't really want to go along with what we expect them to be pressuring us to do. You know, listen, our allies are not going to be shocked that the U.S. is spying on them, right? They're not going to be, oh my gosh, how could you? How dare? Like, everybody's realistic about the fact that everyone is trying to spy on everyone else, especially when you're talking about the United States, the global superpower, right? But the detail contained here that this information was obtained through what's called signal intelligence. So that means, like you said,
it's a phone tap.
Tapping phones, basically. Right. Versus human intelligence, which, you have an inside source and you find out that way. That is quite noteworthy, and they are going to be very unhappy about this. And also, listen, it's important to note these documents are a couple months old. So anything that's contained, in these documents, time has moved and things have shifted. So this is really a snapshot of a moment in time. However, at the time, the South Koreans really had not figured out how they were going to deal with the pressure that was being applied to the U.S. and how it would violate their own internal policy. And they're trying to come up with workarounds, like maybe we're going to ship ammunition to Poland, and then the U.S. can get it from Poland, and then whatever they do with it, I guess we're just going to not really pay attention. But this was an active, ongoing issue and source of tension within the U.S.-South Korean relationship, and dare I say, the revelations about the particular type of spying activities we're engaged in with regard to one of our close allies here is going to be another source of tension in this relationship as well.
At least some weapons did make it to Ukraine, because there's actually a slide that we're in possession of, Krystal, called ROK delivery timeline, which is basically Republic of Korea arms that were able to be sent to Ukraine. I also got from a military analyst who was able to look at this and said that this is going to give the Ukrainians some breathing room in terms of air defense, but also in terms of ammunition and the total number of rounds that were eventually delivered to the Ukrainian military from his analysis of the slide. However, something that he flagged to me about this slide, about the South Korean weapons that eventually did make their way to Ukraine, is that if the Ukrainians do have an offensive, they're going to blow through this at their current expenditure rate in 1 or 2 months. So Ukraine is on the verge of some very, very serious supply problems. Now let's go to the next. Oh, sorry.
Which means we are on the verge of some very significant decisions about how we're going to move forward with regard to, are we going to increase our support and continue, in basically the direction that we have? Are we going to use these revelations, as I know some hawks will already be doing, to push for further escalation, things like fighter jets? Or are we going to recognize that, this is not going to necessarily continue in the direction that has been continued, and try to do whatever we can to bring parties to the negotiating table to end this conflict and be able to move forward. So that's why this is, it's incredibly important to understand what the real picture of the war is, at least as far as the Pentagon has discerned it.
So the second element here, this also is totally insane. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen that we can report for all of you, which has also been reported too by the mainstream media. According to our own intelligence assessment, the chiefs of Mossad and Israel's spy agencies were planning a secret revolt against Netanyahu and were actually involved in trying to instigate some of the protests against the Israeli government. I mean, this is one where it comes from an extremely highly classified assessment from the government, which basically demonstrates to everybody how much the consternation inside of Israel that there was over this, and that they were basically advocating for not only the chiefs but the officials themselves to protest against the judicial reforms. Now, some of this had come out, now not necessarily about the Mossad role, but about the chiefs of how the police agents and others in Israel were upset about this. Some of that had been reported, but to see this with the direct intelligence assessment. This is from March 1st, 2023, that this document appears to have a source on, which is based directly on a CIA intelligence assessment, where they have insight into how the Mossad is thinking and what they were doing to Netanyahu is just absolutely fascinating.
To put it in U.S. terms, just to understand what a bombshell this is probably already within Israel, imagine that the CIA was caught fomenting direct protests against Trump or against Biden or against Obama, right? Where they are actively working to sow dissent against a specific policy decision. I mean, we've covered it here, but just as a reminder, this is all over these proposed judicial reforms of the Netanyahu government that the Israeli public has really revolted against because it's effectively a major power grab from Netanyahu, who himself is under investigation from corruption. What we had seen publicly, actually, we really hadn't seen anything from Mossad. We had seen some consternation from within the military. Remember, all Israeli citizens, with some exceptions, including some religious exceptions, serve in the Israeli military. So it's really, an important societal institution, perhaps even more so than the military here in the U.S. So there was some consternation within the military, but we hadn't heard anything from Mossad. And let me read to you the way that the Washington Post characterized this. They said the leaked document labeled top secret says that in February, senior leaders of the Mossad spy service, this is the quote, advocated for Mossad officials and Israeli citizens to protest the new Israeli government's proposed judicial reforms, including several explicit calls to action that decried the Israeli government, according to Signal's intelligence. Again, that means the phones were tapped or whatever. If accurate, this is a dramatic change in procedure by Mossad's leadership and puts Israel in unprecedented territory, said Natan Sachs, an Israel scholar at the Brookings Institution. It's a sign of just how far the Netanyahu coalition has pushed Israeli society and how high the stakes are. I mean, that's one way to characterize it. But listen, I'm very much opposed to the judicial reforms that are, being pushed forward in Israel. But Mossad, like our own CIA, they are banned from operating on domestic soil. This is supposed to be about, gleaning intelligence from foreign adversaries, not spying on domestic citizens in Israel or fomenting protests against the current government. So this is really something. This is really something.
The other one involving Israel is a crazy slide, and it's called Israel: Pathways to Providing Lethal Aid to Ukraine. And what they basically lay out is scenarios where they can try and force Israel to give more weapons to Ukraine to violate their established neutrality policy. They have several ones which are laid out, all which basically involve duping the Israelis into thinking that they're going after Iran and then taking said weapons and escalation to try and shipping them over to Ukraine. I mean, look, this is astounding to me because it's literally an op inside of a PowerPoint where they're like, yeah, here's ways that we can trick them
manipulate
into
the Israelis,
sending weapons to Ukraine. It also just shows you the background Look, we all know that behind the scenes, we were trying to get other countries to aid Ukraine. But we are going so far as to deceive South Korea on trying to sell weapons to Ukraine, and they know it too. We are going so far as to create scenarios where we're running ops on Israel to make them sell weapons to Ukraine. This is the extent to which we are involved in trying to get the rest of the world to come to Ukraine. We're effectively their State Department and their CIA, it seems, trying to, usually we try and instigate things to help us. It's an interesting kind of flip of things. But yeah, just seeing this, with your own eyes and to look at it, it's crazy. Watching this, they even identify the 3 missile systems which they want the Israelis to give them, and then have scenarios to which they can try and trick them into sending them over to Ukraine.
There's one other piece here that I wanted to know with regard to, our allies. France is actually out with a denial that they have an active military presence in Ukraine, because that is in fact suggested in these documents as well. According to The Guardian, one slide suggests that a small contingent of less than 100 special operations personnel from NATO members, France, America, Britain, and Latvia were already active in Ukraine. Now, think of how explosive that is, the idea that, something that we will not be totally shocked by, but the notion that we could potentially already have boots on the ground in Ukraine alongside other NATO members, when, our public line from the Biden administration is, we're just supporting Ukraine, they're doing all the work. Now, we already knew that wasn't really true, because we also provide them with a lot of intelligence assessments to help them in terms of targeting their strikes and strikes on Russian military leaders, et cetera, is something that we've covered here as well. But, suggesting that there's actually a number of boots on the ground, NATO members from France, America, Britain, and Latvia, is also pretty extraordinary revelation here as well.
So, look, we're going to keep combing through. From what we could tell, these are the most significant stories that we thought were important, and we'll continue to track everything. If more of them are out, by the way, if you do have more leaked documents, please send them to me. We would love to see them. So we will protect you. We will do everything in our power, as you can see here as well. Obviously, we go to lengths to not only, I know this was leaked anonymously on the internet as well, but even being possession of some of the original versions is actually very
pretty wild.
Hard right now.
And it's pretty wild when you look at them. Like, they're the way they appear, it's like someone folded up the briefing and then brought it out of the room and then laid it down on a pile of books.
Right.
And photographed them. It's pretty wild to look at.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're the person who leaked, I'm not going to give you any advice, but anyway, good luck.
Good luck. We'll get to that next.
Protect my own ass. Good luck.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.